Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Astrid and I'll be hosting the English Symposium. Today, two tutors from the UK are joining me and will hold presentations for you. Kieran will talk about the history of the United Kingdom, and Dom will focus on talking about Wales, the Celts, and Wenglish, so basically Welsh English. And if you have any questions for the tutors or comments on the presentations, please feel free to write in the chat during the stream, and we'll talk about your questions after each presentation. 皆様ご参加ありがとうございます。本日の英語シンポジウムのホストです。アセと申します。2人は、イギリスからの講師なんですけれども、本日プレゼンテーションしてくれます。キーラン先生はイギリスの歴史について紹介してくれます。ドム先生はウェールズ系統人、そしてウィングリッシュ、つまりウェールズ風の英語についてプレゼンテーションしてくれます。講師へのご質問やコメントがあれば、英語でも日本語でも気軽に右側にあるチャットボックスから送信をお願いいたします。では、これからプレゼンテーションの方に入りたいと思います。Okay, so I have done a short introduction and then we can already get started with our presentations. So, Kieran, if you want to share your screen, can you start with your presentation, please?
Hello, so good afternoon. My name's Kieran Budd and I'm from the UK, as Astrid suggested and explained. I'm from 20 miles, which translates as about 30 kilometres just west of London, Berkshire, Royal Berkshire, where the Queen's from. But my mother's family are actually from the Republic of Ireland, down in the south and to the west. So I know a reasonable bit about the UK history due to my family's unusual and eclectic mix. So today we are going to have a look at parts of the UK. Where did our flag come from and what created our history? So parts of the UK, or the Union as we call it. So the official title of the UK, the United Kingdom, is actually the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So we've got England down in the south, which is what everybody thinks of because of English language and because of London. But as we're going to find out today, there's a lot more to the UK than just that. So England, that's our flag, the Cross of St. George. So the white with the red cross on it is one of the parts that makes up the Union flag of the UK. Next part, Wales. So up and to the west. I'm not going to speak so much about that because Sensei Dom's going to talk about where he's from in more detail, but that's the flag with the dragon. Scotland, right up at the top. So we will learn a little bit more about that later on, but for now, you can see that the white cross with the blue is another important part of the UK flag. And finally, the north of Ireland, so the very top of the island of Ireland, with the cross of St. Patrick. If you bring England, Scotland, and the north of Ireland together, they make up the Union flag. Everybody's probably wondering why there's no Welsh dragon in the middle. We're going to find a little bit out about that in a minute. So, parts of the UK united together. So, England and Wales joined together in 1552 to become the Kingdom of England. So, as you might have guessed, as it was called the Kingdom of England, I don't think Wales actually really chose for that to happen. I think it was done by force more than anything. And that's why the English flag, the white with the cross of St. George, is represented, but why, unfortunately for Wales, we don't have the dragon in our flag because it's been so long.
Kieran, sorry to interrupt you quickly. I think we're
Certainly.
still on the first slide. Can you move to the next slide, please?
Sorry, trying to see why it's not going forward. I was moving
No,
forwards
it
in
is.
the...
No, it is. Yes.
Okay. Sorry, it didn't jump. So we've got our flags here. Okay. Right, so we've got all of our flags. Can you see the third one now, okay?
Yes.
Okay, so apologies, it would appear in Vimeo. I can't use all of the PowerPoint graphics I had prepared, which was a shame. So, England and Wales together. Scotland, they joined in 1707, so still a very long time ago, but a lot later. And the country changed its name from the Kingdom of England to the Kingdom of Great Britain. So, Great Britain is the main island of the UK, the long tall one, and it's England, Wales and Scotland all put together. A little bit later still, in 1801, the last part of the UK joined. The whole island of Ireland came together to make the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. But finally, due to changing political opinions and disagreements, the South decided to leave, but we just kept a little bit at the top in the North. So we changed our name to Great Britain and Northern Ireland and finally got the flag that we all know today. So it's great knowing about where the flag and everything comes from, but what everybody really wants to know is some interesting things about the history and also the famous people and things that when you go on holiday or visit, you can impress your friends with the knowledge of the different places that you go to. So we're going to look at just a few interesting facts about the different parts of the UK. So first of all, first one, England. So our capital city of this part of the UK is London. And London is also the capital of all of the different regions together. So it's a double capital. The population, the number of people that live in England is 56 million in total. So reasonably big because we've got about 70 million in total, half the population of Japan. And 56 million of those live in England. And we're famous for oishi yummy English breakfast. William Shakespeare, the famous author, and the Beatles. So, if you're asking yourself who are these people, let's find out. Cook style English breakfast, sausages with eggs and toast. It's a bit of an urban legend, a bit of a myth that we eat this all the time. It's actually just a treat for a Sunday or a special occasion. Kind of like where people think everybody in Japan eats sushi every day, but no, it's just an occasional thing. The chap on the top right, William Shakespeare, author of famous books such as Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet. He's very, very famous in a lot of different places. And finally, the Beatles, the most famous thing imaginable because they actually are the largest British export of all times. So we've sold more CDs or records as they used to be from them than anything else from the UK. And fun fact, they are actually so famous that John Lennon even has an airport named after him. They changed the name for the city airport in Liverpool where the Beatles were from to honour him. So enough about England, there's plenty of other parts of the UK. So Wales, just a tiny bit, because Sensei Dom's going to give lots more detail on this. The capital city of Cardiff, lovely place with lots of history. 3 million people, so a smaller population, and we're going to find out more about that later on, I'm sure. It's famous for rugby, a truly fantastic world-beating side that have always done really well in the World Cup. Tom Jones and the Welsh language. So let's learn a little bit more about that. Rugby championships on the top left. Tom Jones, who's a very well-known singer and nowadays on talent contests and things. And Welsh language. So each part of the UK actually has its own language originally. English in England, Welsh in Wales, Gaelic in Scotland, and Northern Ireland has its own version as well. So a few phrases at the bottom, and as you can see, it's totally different. So lots of different regional identity from different places. If we move on now right to the top up into Scotland, lots of mountains and very, very different. Lots of very famous history there. The capital, Edinburgh. So it's pronounced Edinburgh, not Edinburgh. Little unusual tweak in the spelling. And again, that's because of the different languages from the different parts of the UK. So 5.5 million people in Scotland. Big area, not so many people. So it's quite sparsely populated. Not so many people. It's famous for the Loch Ness Monster, Nessie as she's known, Ewan McGregor, and the Gaelic language. So let's find out a little bit more about those interesting facts. The Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie as she's affectionately known. A remote loch, which is basically a deep water lake in the top of Scotland. Very difficult to get to and quite a remote location. A legend started that people had seen a monster there which has different shapes described. Some people like the picture say it looks like a dinosaur, other people think it's a fish. Some people say she's definitely true, other people say they think they invented the legend to try and get more tourists to come. It certainly made Loch Ness popular because before COVID, thousands of people from all kinds of different countries visit every year. So she certainly made the loch famous. The loch itself is very, very dark, as you can probably see from the picture. That's because the mountains stop much sunlight getting in, and there's also lots of dirt in the water as well. So if you ever go to a Scottish loch, you'll be amazed by how black it is. You can't see any fish or anything there. So it would definitely be a perfect place for a monster to live. On the right, sure you probably know who this one is. Ewan McGregor, famous for being Obi-Wan Kenobi. Actually the second Obi-Wan, because the first one, Alec Guinness, who is also British, was in the original trilogy. The younger, newer Obi-Wan, he's been in lots of the films, he's been recently on television, a very well-known famous Scottish actor. If you look at the bottom, we've got some information about the Scottish language. So, some words are the same as English. So, for example, hello is pronounced with a distinct accent like hello. Some others are completely different. So you're probably starting to see now why English has so many unusual spelling patterns where words don't sound the way they should be. That's because as the language has developed, we've taken words from English, Welsh, Scottish, and other countries, and they've all got mixed together. We often call those loan words. You have something similar in Japanese, don't you, where many words have been taken from English and other languages. For example, mosabaga, written in katakana, or Starbucks. Again, loan words taken from another language from where they come from. So the last bit of our union. Northern Ireland. Below Scotland and just off to the left or the west. Capital city of Belfast. So you can see the little star there for the regional capital. 1.8 million people, so not so many. A population roughly the size of one of the less densely populated areas like Okinawa where I live, but it's a small area. The north of Ireland's famous for the Titanic, Liam Neeson, and the Ulster Scots dialect of the Gaelic language. So again, a bit like Japan where you've got Ryukyu Hogen, the Okinawan dialect here. They have their own distinct language and different words. So, Titanic. A true but very sad story over 100 years ago now, in the early part of the last century, there was the famous ship. Most people always think of her in England because she left from a port called Southampton, but she was actually made in Belfast. The first of 3 ships of the type. She was meant to be unsinkable. There was even somebody who famously said she's so well built, even God himself can't sink her. Unfortunately, they were proved wrong. You might have seen the Leonardo DiCaprio movie. She hit an iceberg, she sunk, and most of the people unfortunately died. Liam Neeson on the right, a famous actor, thrillers and action style movies, originally from the Ulster region. He still has the quite distinct accent when you hear him speak. And the last bit, Ulster Scots. So, some completely different words. So, nay bother at the bottom, no bother at all. That's popular in Scotland as well. And we means little and small. So, as you can see, there's some things that don't exist in the standard English dictionary. Like when you come to Okinawa and walk into a konbini, rather than getting the bing bong crash and matador, you get hi sai mensore, hello and welcome. They do the same thing there. In the north of Ireland, they use the local dialect. So, just a few fun bits of information, some facts and figures about the history, and some famous people and things. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope that's been useful and informative, and I hope if you want to visit the UK, if you've not been before, you think about visiting and going to some of the other areas. Most people normally stick to the area around London because it's close to the airport, like where everybody flies into Haneda or Narita-Kuko and sees Tokyo and Osaka. Get out and explore and try the different bits of the UK because there really is so much to see and do. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. And that was really interesting. There's also a lot of information in there I didn't know yet. If everybody wants to write comments and ask questions, please feel free to write in the chat. もしコメントありましたら、質問でもコメントでもぜひチャットまでお願いします。We have one question or more of a comment from Nori Sakai, who says, I'm surprised at the population gap between England and Scotland. So would you say generally
Yes,
Scotland is less densely populated there?
it's a lot less densely populated, and actually, the population of England is quite confusing because most of the people in England live in the south, around London and the south of England, from the area called the Midlands, the middle of England below. And that's because the further up you get, the more mountainous it gets. Scotland has a lot of mountains, and if you go above the capital city of Edinburgh and its sister city of Glasgow up, there's very few people there. It's just mountains and wild, a bit like if you go to some of the remote regions of Hokkaido, or similar to where I live in Okinawa. The top third of the island doesn't really have anybody there because it's just a natural park with Yama and beach and other things.
Yeah, and Nori Sakai also said, as for Wales, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Gerard Howell Thomas is also famous thanks to Tour de France. Do you know
I
this
will
person?
let Sensei Dom talk about him later on for Wales. But yeah, he's very famous and very well known.
And we also have a comment from Chomayo who says, すごくアイランドに行きたくなりました。とても勉強になりました。So thanks. This was really educational, and I really want to go to Ireland now, or probably rather Northern Ireland because that's a part you maybe talked about.
So many different bits to see, and definitely well worth a visit. And the north and south of Ireland are very different again. So the top of Belfast is very different to the south, where it's become part of the Republic. And there's a lot of diversity, as we're going to find out in the next presentation. Even different counties in the UK, for a small area, have quite a lot of variation. But you get that in Japan, right? The difference between somewhere like the Ryukyus where I live versus Kyoto compared to going up north, Amori or Hokkaido, lots of different variation.
Yeah, definitely. Dom, do you have any comments or questions for Kieran? Did you feel well represented for Wales?
Yes, I did. Thank you very much for that, Kieran. I really appreciated the little bit of history and a little bit of language of Wales and some of our famous people. So thank you very much. And a great presentation, by the way. I've only got one question. You mentioned the Union flag, the flag of Wales, England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. But we often hear of the term the Union Jack. Now, is there a difference between the Union Jack and the Union flag?
Yes, so I was wondering if anybody was going to ask that actually, so that's a great question. So, Union Jack is actually a slightly slang name. It comes from the fact that when a ship, or particularly a commissioned naval vessel, so one of the ships of Her Majesty's Navy, when they're back in the UK, they put this flag up the front. They fly the flag at the top and salute the Queen. And that flag is put up a pole, a special flagpole, which is referred to as the Jack pole. So it became a slang name of flying the flag from the Jack pole. And the sailors, when they came home, referred to it as Union Jacking because they were flying the flag to salute the Queen before they got off. And then the name just stuck. And it's just a habit because I've spent a lot of time on boats and ships and family have been in the military before, that I've got the habit of referring to it as the Union flag rather than the Union Jack. But nowadays, both names are completely accepted and totally normal. But that's a great question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I didn't know the background there either. We have another comment saying living cost and rent is huge in London as far as I know, so I'd like to live somewhere else in the UK.
It's very true. London and the south of England, where I'm from, just outside, is equivalent to Tokyo prices. So rent's very similar, the cost of things is very similar. It's made worse by the fact that unlike Japan, where the minimum wage is different for each prefecture, in the UK we have one standard minimum wage all the way across. So if you have a government job with a set salary, you can really notice the difference if you live in the south near London versus somewhere cheaper. So yeah, get outside of London and try some other places and you'll really notice the difference in terms of the food, different things, cheaper prices.
Yeah, I would say that's a struggle in lots of capital cities, that they tend to be really expensive. And so
Yeah.
for the UK, there seem to be many nice places that you can choose instead. Thank you so much. Yeah, I would say we can move on right now to Dom's presentation. If you want to share your screen and start with your part.
Okay, so let me just go here. Okay, is that sharing okay?
Yes,
Yep.
I think we are.
Great. Okay, so I'll start it off. Thank you very much, Kieran, and thank you very much, Astrid. Okay, so my presentation today, good evening, everybody. We're going to look at the Celts and who were they? Now, notice this is pronounced Celts, not Celts, as some European nations pronounce it. But we're going to find out more about the Celts and their history and their language. Also, some people don't realize, but Celtic nations have a Shinto, and we're going to find out a little bit more about that. And finally, we're going to look at the strange language or dialect of Wenglish. My name is Teacher Dom, and thank you very much for coming today. Okay, so first of all, who were the Celts? Well, the first image we see on movie screens around the world, a representation of the Celts, is Braveheart, this man, this warrior going into battle, his face painted blue, a fierce warrior, fierce, strong fighter. But is it true? Well, let's look more. This is an artist's representation of the Celts. And as you can see, he's holding an axe. He's a fierce, strong man. They were warriors. They fought battles. That's what they were known and celebrated for. They were even known as excellent mercenaries, fighting for other countries and other nations because of their prowess, their strength in battle. And they were also a very ancient people. The warrior nation, the belief in war, in fighting was very strong in this culture. And it is actually true, they did paint themselves blue to go into battle. So that part of the myth, the legend, is actually correct. Unfortunately, we don't know a lot about the Celtic nations or the Celtic people. The problem is they did not write anything down. They spoke stories from one generation to another, from one family to another. So we have no written history from the Celts themselves. However, we do have some history of the Celts, but that was written by the Romans. But can we trust this history? Because the Romans were the sworn enemies of the Celts. They fought many, many times. Therefore, what the Romans wrote down was that the Celts were fierce, unnatural, savage, almost animals. But can we believe this? So let's look a little bit more about the Celts. First of all, who were they? Well, yes, they were warriors. They did fight in battles. That's all true. But they were also craftsmen. Craftsmen meaning they built things. They made things with their hands. And they were well known for this. What about their women? Well, actually, at a time when women were subservient or lower than men in most areas around the world, actually, in Wales, women were equal. In Scotland, in the Celtic nations where they came from, men and women had equal status, equal rights. It's true they did love a fight. Even their women loved to go into battle. As you can see from the picture, the famous Celtic warrior Boudica or Boadicea. So what do we know about the women? Well, they had power. in Celtic society, as much as men. They could own land as men could own land. They had their own possessions. Again, not something which was very common at that time around the world. Also, if they didn't get on with their husband, they could divorce or separate from their married partner. And this was very unusual in the world at the time of the Celtic nations. And the women even went into battle with the men. They fought alongside them. It was seen as equal status. Even the boys and girls, the children, were taught to fight at a very young age. But let's go into some of the myths about the Celts. What's true, what's not true? We often see Celts half naked or naked, pictures of them running into battle, scaring enemies. But is it true? Well, did they go to fight without clothes? Did it scare the enemy? Is this true? Did they fight naked? No, that's not true. That's complete myth. Sometimes they did go without tops to scare the enemy, to show the paint, to show the fierceness, and to show their prowess, but no, they didn't fight naked. Now, looking at the history of the Celts and where they came from, well, as we have no written history, the only thing we know about them is that they came from Central and Eastern Europe around 400 BC. As you can see here, the major Celtic cultural area that exists there in parts of France, Germany, Belgium, going into modern-day Ukraine, and even making raids into Russia. As you can see, the Roman Republic of Italy down there. Again, the Celtic nations were constantly warring against the Romans. So they covered a large area. And around 500 BC, we know they made expansions into the UK, into Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and England. And also around 600 BC, the area of Iberia, known as modern-day Spain and Portugal. So they're a very ancient people. But as I said, they have no written history. They did not write anything down. They had no written language, only spoken. So we really don't know where they started exactly. This is our best guess based on archaeological remains from evidence we see deep below the ground. And also another fact which is not well known is they were not one nation. The Celtic nation did not really exist. They were a group of tribes and clans, and you could have different sizes of groups, from the family to groups of families, all the way up to large areas, as you can see here, the major tribes and clans of the Celts, all the way into Eastern Europe and Russia, down into Germany as well, with the Hallstatt territory, one of the original centers of the Welsh people, or the Celtic people as we know it, and Belgium, Spain, France, Portugal, and up into Britain. And we also know that each group was different. They did not exist as one Celtic nation. They had different laws. Their customs, their traditions, what they did, how they lived, were all different from group to group, from clan and tribe to clan. Now, this map here may not be entirely clear. We have the UK in the top left, we have France and Spain to the left, and Russia and Eastern Europe to the right. And this line shows the migration, the movement of the Celtic nations from Eastern Europe through Central Europe, down into Spain, around up through France and into the UK, traveling thousands of miles as the Celtic nations spread across Europe. Now, we often see in comics, in cartoons, some very strange hats that they used to wear. As you can see here, a bird flapping. And some people believe they wore these hats into battle to scare the enemy. They were indeed quite crazy, but probably not very practical to use in battles. Therefore, we believe they were probably not used for fighting, but simply in ceremonies and special occasions. You don't want to be flapping like a bird as you run into the enemy. So instead, we had special occasions where these hats were brought out to show the prowess, the fighting, and the connection to nature at the same time. As you can see again, modern depictions of the Celts from the north of France had these very crazy, strange helmets with animal horns and wings and other things. However, we now believe probably not very practical to go into battle, but much better for ceremonies and special occasions, which they had a lot of. They were also craftsmen, as I said earlier in the presentation. They created some amazing jewelry and artifacts, such as brooches and helmets. This gold thing you see on the top left is called a torque, and a torque was worn by the equivalent of a king or queen. And the torque was actually worn around the neck rather than on the head, and it showed the leader, the strength and the prowess of a leader of a large tribe or clan. And this jewelry was actually quite far ahead of most of the craftsmen's jewelry created in Europe at the time, because the Celtic nations had access to lots of different metals, lots of raw materials coming from the UK. But what about modern Celts and where they are today? Well, here you can see a map of the UK at the top. There's France and Spain, or the north of Spain at the bottom. And this is where they are currently settled. We have Scotland in the very north. Then we have Wales, Ireland, and a small area of England that used to be known as Cerno, which is modern-day Cornwall. In addition, we had the Isle of Man, a very small island off the coast of Scotland. And we had Brittany in northwest France, and also Asturias in north Spain. So these are the modern Celtic nations of Wales, Scotland, Ireland, Brittany, an area of France, Cornwall, an area of England, Galicia in Spain, the Isle of Man, a very small, and also a very small area called Asturias in northeastern Spain. So they do exist today. As you can see here, this is a larger map of the UK, and it shows the strong populations of the Celtic people. And that little arrow there shows where I was born, a place called Swansea, or in the Welsh language, Abertawe, in South Wales. Now, the language of Wales, many people think it's a dialect, it's a part of English, it came from English. But as you can see from this sign, this word, actually it's a very, very different language. In fact, it has no relation, no connection to English at all. And also our grammar and our structure is very different. We put the names of places together to create some very long place names, similar to the system used in Germany, an agglutinative language. And if anyone would like to try pronouncing this one, I will check your pronunciation later. It is actually Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll go gerich und robill Llantysilio go gogoch. Lots of spitting. Okay, we're going to look now at some Welsh sayings and phrases. And these are the most common ones used in Wales, mostly today in North Wales, not in South Wales. So the first, most common one when you meet somebody, bore da. And bore da means good day, hello. The next one you would use is talking about the people of Wales, Cymru. Actually, this is only the people, not the language. If we're talking about the language, we talk about Cymraeg. As you can see, we have a slightly different pronunciation system. And also we roll our R's, so it's a R, a Cymraeg. And this is the name of the Welsh language. If it's afternoon, you might say Prynhawn da, good afternoon. And later on, you'd say Noswyth da. And that means good evening. And when you're ready to end the day, you would say Nos da, good night. And finally, we have a greeting. How do you say hello, how are you in Welsh? It's actually not sutme, but it's shwmai. Shwmai means how are you? And when you enter Wales by land, you come to a big sign which says Croesio. And Croesio means welcome. Croesio I Gymru, welcome to Wales. As I said, it has no connection to English at all. It's very, very different. The origin is very different. So now we're going to look at modern day Wales, and we have a dialect in the south of Wales where we had much more connection and intermingling or mixing of Welsh and English people. And that gave us a language or a dialect called Wenglish, which is a mixture of Welsh and English. So let's look at some of the common nouns and vocabulary used in Wenglish. Some are English, some are Welsh, some are a combination of the two. And these Wenglish terms have very special, specific meaning. They mean something very special, different to the English it comes from. For example, the most famous Wenglish word is cwtch, and cwtch means a hug. It's very important in Wales to have hugs. For example, gis y cwtch then. Next one we have is tidy. This has nothing to do with cleaning your house. It actually means good or great. For example, you've done a tidy job on that. That's tidy, that is. It's excellent. It's very good. Well done. Next one, we have tampin. And tampin is actually an adjective to mean angry. For example, I'm tampin I am. And as you notice here, the grammar of Welsh imposes on English a little. The I am is a repetition of the verb structure from the first part of the sentence, because that is how Welsh sounds. That is how Welsh is formed. I'm tampin I am. But strangely, tamping can have a slightly different meaning. Tamping down means raining very heavily. It's tamping down. Next, we have lush. Now in English, lush means green and verdant and full of life. In Wenglish, it means something really, really nice. We love it. Your dress is lush, it is. I loves it. And again, Welsh grammar coming in here. I loves it. We change. It's not a mistake. That's how we speak. Now, this is an English phrase, but it has a very different meaning in Welsh. In a bit. It means later or sometime in the future. If you study Spanish, you may have heard of mañana, and mañana means not just tomorrow, but sometime in the future. This afternoon, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, in a bit. See you in a bit. And noblin. Now, noblin is an adjective. It means very, very cold. It's noblin today. Now, two more here. We've got chopsy and chopsin. Chopsy, the adjective, chopsin, the verb. A person who is chopsin is a person who talks too much or argues too much. And finally, but. Again, a very different meaning in English. In Welsh, it means friend, mate, buddy. How you doing, but? Okay, let's look at some Wenglish phrases now. Now, these do look a bit strange, so let's see. First one is a direct Welsh translation. Achafi. Achafi, that's horrible. That's gross. I don't like it. Achafi, Sam. Take your shoes off. Next one we have is doo-doo or juju. And juju actually is an exclamation of shock or surprise. For example, doo-doo, the rain is non-stop. Next one we have is a very strange one, raining old ladies and sticks. The English equivalent being raining cats and dogs. And that's because it's a direct translation of the Welsh. Bwrw hen ragedd y fyn. Now, we also have a very strange phrase called pickin' to rain. And pickin' to rain means there's a very small amount of rain in the air. It looks like it's going to start raining. Now, we're going to look at how Wenglish takes on grammar and grammatical structures from Welsh and puts them into English to create some very, very strange phrases. The first one, whose coat's that jacket? Now, this has nothing to do with coats or jackets. It simply means whose clothes are those? Whose clothes are they? And this is Welsh grammar imposed on English. English language, but with a very different structure. Another example of this, which is common in Wales today, whose daps are them trainers? And daps and trainers, both words for shoes or sports shoes. In English, whose shoes are these? Or whose shoes are these? And we have a very strange use of the word to. We put it at the end of sentences. For example, where's it to then? It has nothing to do with direction. It's simply part of Welsh grammar. Where's the castle to? Where's the shop to? Now, again, we have the phrase in a minute, but we have now in a minute. And now in a minute, again, means any length of time in the future. I'll be there now in a minute means soon-ish, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. We don't know. Okay, moving on to the culture of the Celts. Originally, there was a feast or festival or celebration called Samhain. And Samhain is actually, as you can see from the picture, the origin of the celebration of Halloween. Therefore, without the Celts, we would not have modern-day Halloween. What else do we know about the Celts? Well, religion and gods, they did believe in a type of religion, but they believed in animism, the worship of nature, spirits, animals, etc. They believed in the spirits of the forest, of animals, gods in special places, in lakes, in rivers, etc. And they believed that the forest was a very special place. Special rivers, special lakes were seen as a door to the spirit world, and they were respected, and that in effect was the Celtic religion. But how are they linked to Shinto? Well, there are some connections with Shinto. For example, they made shrines in special trees, very similar to the Shinto religion. They also understood that water was very important to life, and they worshipped and respected it, along with the spirits they believe lived there and gave it life. And as with Shinto, they made shrines or special churches or other buildings to worship and respect lakes and water. As you know, water is also very important in Shinto. But moving on to animism. Well, what is animism? The Celts believed that animals, nature, places had these spirits within them. That was the connection to the spirit world, that kami or spirits came from nature. And this is the essence of animism. As you know, Shinto has similar beliefs, not the same, but some similarities. In Shinto, there's a belief that there are kami or spirits. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, so I apologize. There are kami in mountains, rivers, plants, animals. These all have some spirit that can be worshipped or respected. So finally, what have we learned? Well, firstly, we know that the Celts were a warrior people. They fought battles. They went into wars. They were big fighters. We also know they did wear clothes in battle. They didn't go into battle naked. That is a myth. And painting their face, their bodies blue to intimidate, to frighten the enemy is indeed true. And strangely, women were equal. I say strangely because this did not exist in many other cultures at that time around the world. So very unique. They also came from Central and Eastern Europe near modern-day Ukraine. And they lived all over Europe in different tribes and clans, not only one people. Yes, they had funny hats, but not for battle, not for war or fighting, simply for celebration. And as you saw from the maps, they now live mostly in the UK, in Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and the north of France, with some other small populations in Spain and on the Isle of Man. And as you've seen from the examples, the language of Wales is very, very different. It has no connection at all to English. Halloween, we have to thank the Celtic people for that. That's where it came from. And they believed in animism, a belief that animals and nature possess spirits. And also that water was very important for life and should be respected. As we said, the spirits or kami of places is similarly in the Shinto belief system. So, thank you very much for listening, but before I finish, here are some books you might like to read to find out a little bit more about the Celts and their history. There's a very funny and enjoyable book called The Cutthroat Celts from a series called Horrible Histories, an excellent read and a lot of truth in this. We also have The Myths and Legends of the Celts, an excellent book on legends and stories of Wales. And then the famous Welsh poet, Dylan Thomas, and his book, A Child's Christmas in Wales. And finally, Alwyn Rees and Brynley Rees wrote a book called Celtic Heritage, which is talking about traditions of both Ireland and Wales. Thank you very much for coming and listening to my presentation today, and I hope you found it enjoyable. And I look forward to seeing you very soon on Cafetalk.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dom. That was really, really interesting. I think you can stop sharing your screen. I'm going to
try. Trying at the moment.
First of all, one student is saying your pronunciation of kami is very good from a Japanese perspective.
Thank you very much.
Your Japanese. And they were also saying in a bit sounds similar to shortly. And
indeed,
another student, May, was saying, haha, look at the long name, amazing. So that's very unique to see this long of a place name. Kelly was saying, hello, thanks for the good presentation. I saw the movie Braveheart. In this movie are the people who fight against England Celtic because their appearance looks like the picture in your presentation.
They were indeed. They were Scots Celts from Scotland.
Oh, okay. And yeah, another comment saying, I thought that those helmets were used for battles. Those don't seem practical in the battlefield indeed. So yeah, as you said, it would be quite hard to fight in those. And the women on the pictures you showed look like Athena, so like the Greek goddess Athena. Do you think there's some overlap there in the imagery?
Absolutely, yes. A lot of traditions, beliefs, gods, etc. were inherited from other lands and brought into the Celtic nation. So yes, there is a lot of intermingling, mixture.
Okay, and why did they use blue was also asked. Do you know that, of why the color blue was chosen?
Now, this came from plants that were available at the time. So it was the only color that was available within the geography and nature of the Celtic nations. So blue was a strong color. It could be seen clearly from a distance on the skin. So it was believed it gave the Celtic warriors power, and it was easily or readily available, more or less.
Okay, thank you so much. And then, yeah, we have one more saying, thank you for the very interesting presentations. So that's to the both of you, of course. And Kieran, do you have any question for Dom or anything that you want to comment?
I was going to say I particularly enjoyed the link to Shinto. That was very, very interesting. And I found a couple of interesting references you mentioned with regards to the Wenglish. I'd forgotten because it's been so many years, but I have an uncle that actually lives in Cardiff. And when I joined the police service 15 years ago, I actually trained with a guy from Swansea, and my first sergeant was from I can't remember the name of the place now. He was from somewhere in Cardigan Bay. And I never made the association before, but both him and all of us Englishmen as well, we had both tidy and choppy integrated in slang. It was included in the police service, and even guys that were ex-military said it would even be put on your charge sheet if you got too drunk and ended up in jail. You get accused of being drunk and chopping off. And we used to high five and say tidy job after a successful drugs warrant or anything. So it's in common circulation in certain circles, even if my family and other people that weren't in the services, the members that weren't didn't have a clue what I meant. So,
Fantastic. Thank you, Kieran. I'm glad it's expanded beyond the Celtic nations into England as well.
yeah, it's definitely got shared around.
Yeah, I thought your Welsh or Winglish examples also said a lot about the weather in Wales, that you had so many different ways to talk about rain.
Very true. One of the wettest places in Europe.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, and yeah, we're actually a little bit over time, so I'm just going to ask you to just say something to the students, talk about your lessons, and anything you would like to tell the students here in the end. And if Kieran wants to start, you can go ahead.
So, I like to talk about news and things that are relevant to both the UK and Japan, have a mix and draw cultural references between both. I always lived in the UK prior to moving to Japan 3.5 years ago, and it's always been Okinawa Prefecture where I've lived. So, always interesting to find out new things. So, the more people I meet, the more I learn about different areas myself. So, hopefully, I can chat with more people again in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, Dom, if you want to continue.
Thank you very much. Yes, I will be on Cafetalk, as my students probably already know. We talk about a huge variety of subjects, anything from environment to politics to news to culture to history to language. So if you're interested in knowing anything more about me and my travels and living around the world, and I also want to know more about you, come and have a chat and let's see what we can find out and learn together.
Okay, yeah, thank you both so much for your presentations today. It was really, really educational and fun. And I hope everybody else had a good time as well. And see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice.
Bye.
Goodbye.